The stars were dying. Not the stars themselves, but everything that lived beneath them. Ambassador Tellus stood at the great window of the Valorian High Council chamber and watched the darkness eat another world. Neth Aver Prime hung in the sky like a blue jewel. It was the heart of the Valorian collective, home to 8 billion souls. Behind it, far in the distance, a planet burned. That was Kethmora, the fourth world to fall to the Hollow in 7 months. Tellus could still see the orange glow of its death even from here. The council chamber was silent. 12 species had come together 3,000 years ago to form the collective. They had shared knowledge, art, music, and dreams. They had believed that peace was the highest form of existence. They had been wrong. High Counselor Vethan spoke first. His voice was old and tired. The fleet at Kethmora is gone. All 400 ships. The Hollow did not even slow down. Tellus closed his eyes. 400 ships. 50,000 soldiers. Gone in a single day. We have 43 vessels remaining, said Admiral Kethros. He was a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms. Once he had commanded the greatest fleet in 3 galaxies. Now he commanded ruins. They are damaged. They are tired. They cannot hold Nethaver for more than 2 days. Then we evacuate, said Counselor Miraset. She was young and afraid. We take what we can and we run. Run where? Tellus asked quietly. The Hollow have consumed 12 galaxies. They do not stop. They do not negotiate. They do not rest. There is nowhere to run. The silence returned. It was the silence of people who knew they were going to die. Tellus had lived for 300 years. He had seen wars and plagues and disasters. He had seen species rise and fall. But he had never seen anything like the Hollow. They were not a species. They were a hunger. 1 billion ships moving as one mind, eating everything in their path. Worlds, moons, stars themselves. Nothing satisfied them. Nothing stopped them. The Valorians had tried everything. They had sent diplomats. The Hollow ate them. They had sent weapons. The Hollow absorbed them. They had built walls of ships and stations. The Hollow walked through them like they were made of paper. Now there was nothing left. No fleet. No hope. No future. Tellus turned from the window and looked at the ancient machine in the corner of the chamber. It was small, barely the size of his hand. It was also older than the collective itself. There is one thing we have not tried, he said. The council followed his gaze. Some of them gasped. Others laughed bitterly. The beacon? Admiral Kethros shook his head. Ambassador, that is a myth. A children's story. The humans have been gone for centuries. Have they? Tellus walked to the beacon and picked it up. It was warm in his hands. We know they existed. We have records. They came to our ancestors in ships of silver and gold. They studied our culture. They healed our sick. They gave us gifts and asked for nothing in return. And then they left, Counselor Miraset said. They disappeared into the dark and never came back. That was 500 years ago, Tellus. They are dead. Their world is dust. Tellus looked at the beacon. It was simple in design. A metal sphere with a single button. The humans had given it to the first Valorian High Council with a simple message. If you ever need us, press this. We will come. No one had ever pressed it. The Valorians had believed they would never need help. They had believed that peace would protect them. They had believed that the universe was kind. The universe was not kind. We are going to die anyway, Tellus said softly. Our children are going to die. Our history is going to die. Everything we built for 3,000 years is going to disappear into the belly of the Hollow. He looked at the council. What do we lose by pressing a button? High Counselor Vethan was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Do it." Telos pressed the button. Nothing happened. The beacon did not glow. It did not make a sound. It simply sat in his hand, cold and silent and dead. As I said, Admiral Kethros turned away. A myth. But Telos did not put the beacon down. He held it and waited. He did not know why. He simply felt that he should wait. 3 weeks passed. The hollow drew closer. Their swarm now filled the sky like a black cloud. 2,000 ships, each the size of a small moon, surrounded Neth Aver Prime. They did not attack. They simply waited. The hollow liked to let their prey see death coming. It made the fear sweeter. The Valorian people said their goodbyes. Parents held their children. Lovers held each other. Priests prayed to gods who did not answer. The 43 remaining ships formed a thin line between the hollow and the planet. They knew they would die. They chose to die fighting. Telos stood at the window and watched the end approach. He had stopped sleeping. He had stopped eating. He simply watched and waited and held the beacon in his hand. On the 22nd day, something changed. It started as a whisper, a crackle in the communication systems. Then a voice, clear and strong, cutting through every channel on every ship and every station in the system. "This is Fleet Admiral Park Yuna of the United Earth Defense Command. We received your signal. Hold your position. We are coming." The council chamber exploded into chaos. Counselors shouted. Officers ran to their stations. Admiral Kethros grabbed Telos by the shoulders. "It worked? They are real? They are coming?" Telos could not speak. He could only nod. "How many ships?" Kethros demanded. "Ask them how many ships they are bringing." Telos opened a channel. His voice shook. "Admiral Park, this is Ambassador Telos of the Valorian Collective. We thank you for responding. The enemy fleet numbers 2,000 vessels. How many ships can you bring?" There was a pause. Then Admiral Park Yuna spoke again. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Ambassador Telos, we are aware of the enemy's strength. We have been watching your situation for some time. We simply needed to be certain you truly wanted our help before we acted." "Wanted your help?" Telos nearly laughed. "We are dying, Admiral. Of course we want your help. Then help is what you shall receive." Another pause. "Ambassador, I must warn you. We are not the humans your ancestors knew. We have changed. What you are about to see may disturb you. But I promise you this. We did not come to conquer. We came because you called. And humans always answer when someone calls for help." The communication ended. Telos looked at Admiral Kethros. The old soldier's face was pale. "What did she mean?" Kethros asked. "What did she mean they have changed?" Before Telos could answer, the sky tore open. It was not a hyperspace window. It was something else. A wound in reality itself, burning with white fire. And from that wound came ships. Black ships. Angular ships. Ships covered in weapons that made no sense. Ships that looked less like vessels and more like weapons themselves. They poured out of the wound in the sky like an endless river of metal and fire. 1, 10, 50, 100, 200. The count kept rising. Admiral Kethros fell to his knees. Telos simply stared. The humans had not just survived. They had become something else. Something terrible. Something beautiful. Something that had come to save them. The wound in reality stayed open for 6 hours. Ships kept coming. They came in waves, each wave larger than the last. First came the destroyers, small and fast and covered in gun batteries. Then came the cruisers, 3 kilometers long, their hulls scarred from 1,000 battles. Then came the battleships, 5 kilometers of black metal and burning engines. And finally, at the end, came the flagship. The Eternal Dawn was 12 kilometers long. It was not beautiful. It was not elegant. It was a weapon given form. Every surface bristled with cannons and missile pods and strange devices that the Valorian scientists could not understand. It moved through space like a predator, slow and confident and absolutely certain of its own power. Fleet Admiral Park Yuna stood on the command bridge and watched the hollow swarm through the main viewing screen. She was a small woman with short black hair and eyes that had seen too much death. She wore a simple uniform with no decorations. She did not need decorations. Everyone in the fleet knew who she was. 712 vessels in position. Captain Kang Do-yoon reported. He stood at the tactical station, his fingers moving across displays that showed every ship in the fleet. All weapons charged. All crews ready. Good. Park Yuna did not take her eyes off the viewing screen. The hollow swarm was vast. 2,000 bioorganic ships, each one a living nightmare of flesh and metal and hunger. They had stopped moving when the human fleet arrived. They were studying this new threat, learning. The hollow always learned. Commander Bae Jian approached with a datapad. Admiral, the Valorian flagship is requesting communication. They want to coordinate tactics. Park Yuna almost smiled. They have 43 ships held together by repair drones and hope. There is nothing to coordinate. Tell them to stay behind our lines and protect the evacuation transports. We will handle the rest. Yes, Admiral. Bae Jian paused. They are asking about our weapons. They say they have never seen technology like ours. They want to know where we developed it. Park Yuna finally turned from the viewing screen. Her eyes were old. Not in years, but in experience. Tell them we developed it in pain. Tell them we developed it in blood. Tell them we developed it because we had no choice. She looked back at the hollow. Tell them we spent 300 years preparing for this day, and we do not intend to waste a single moment of that preparation. The communication went out. The Valorians fell silent. On the Valorian flagship, Ambassador Telos watched the human fleet with something between hope and terror. He had expected a few ships, maybe 100 at most. He had not expected an armada that made his entire fleet look like toys. Admiral Kethrus stood beside him, his 4 hands gripping the railing of the observation deck. Their ships are monsters, he whispered. Look at them. No curves, no grace. Just angles and weapons and armor. They said they had changed, Telos replied quietly. I did not understand what they meant. Now I do. What happened to them? Kethros asked. The records say they were peaceful. They were scientists. They were healers. These ships are not made by healers. Telos shook his head. I do not know. But I am grateful they came. The hollow moved first. It started slowly. 100 ships at the edge of the swarm began to advance. They were testing the humans, probing their defenses. The hollow always tested. They liked to learn before they killed. The human response was immediate. Fleet Admiral Park Yuna spoke one word, fire. The space between the fleets turned white. Telos had seen weapons before. He had seen plasma cannons and railguns and nuclear missiles. He had seen the Valorian fleet unleash everything it had against the hollow. None of it had worked. The human weapons were different. Beams of light cut through the advancing hollow ships like they were made of paper. The beams did not just damage the ships. They erased them. One moment a hollow vessel was there, a moon-sized nightmare of teeth and hunger. The next moment there was nothing. Not even debris. What is that? Kethros gasped. What weapon is that? Tellus could not answer. He could only watch. The Hollow reacted. They always reacted. The entire swarm began to move. 2,000 ships rushing toward the human fleet like a wave of death. The Hollow screamed across every communication channel, a sound of pure rage and hunger that made the Valorian crew cover their ears. The humans did not flinch. Captain Kang Do-yoon read the incoming data with calm precision. Enemy fleet advancing. Contact in 4 minutes. Launch the interceptors, Park Yuna ordered. Tell the battleships to form line Alpha. Cruisers take flanking position. Destroyers screen the carriers. The orders went out. 700 ships moved as one, each vessel knowing exactly where to go and what to do. There was no confusion, no hesitation, just perfect coordination born from centuries of training. Commander Baejian monitored the fleet's movement. Admiral, the Hollow are targeting our destroyers. They seem to think they are our weak point. Park Yuna allowed herself a small smile. Let them think that. The Hollow crashed into the destroyer line. For a moment, it seemed like the small human ships would be overwhelmed. The Hollow vessels were massive, covered in organic weapons that fired acid and plasma and things that had no name. Then the destroyers activated their secondary weapons. Every destroyer carried missile pods, hundreds of missiles each. When they fired, the sky filled with streaks of light. But these were not ordinary missiles. They were smart. They thought. They adapted. They hunted. Each missile found a hollow ship. Each missile burrowed into the organic hull and began to eat. Nanomachines, smaller than dust, consuming the bioorganic matter from within. The hollow ships began to die from the inside out. The swarm pulled back. For the first time in its billion-year existence, the Hollow felt something it had never felt before. Fear. On the eternal dawn, Park Yuna watched the enemy retreat. She felt no joy. She felt no triumph. She only felt tired. Kang Do-hyun reported the first wave's results. 87 enemy vessels destroyed. No human losses. They will adapt, Park Yuna said quietly. They always adapt. This was just the beginning. She turned to look at the Valorian ships huddled behind her fleet. They were small and broken and afraid. They reminded her of Earth, 300 years ago, before the Dominion came, before humanity learned what it meant to be alone in a hostile universe. A communication request came through. It was Ambassador Telos. Admiral Park, his voice shook with emotion. What we just witnessed. How is this possible? Your weapons, your ships, your coordination. You destroyed nearly 100 hollow vessels in minutes. We could not do that in months. Park Yuna considered her response carefully. Ambassador, do you know why we left your region of space 500 years ago? No, the records do not say. We assumed you simply lost interest. We did not lose interest. Park Yuna looked at the distant stars. We went home because we sensed a threat coming. A species called the Dominion had noticed humanity. They decided we were too dangerous to live. So they came to destroy us. Talos was silent. We called for help, Park Yuna continued. We sent messages to every species we had contacted. The Valorians, the Cathari, the Miraset, everyone. We told them the Dominion was coming. We told them we would die without assistance. We begged for help. What happened? Telos asked, though he already knew the answer. Nothing happened. No one came. We faced the Dominion alone. We lost 2 billion people in the first year. We lost Earth itself for a decade. We nearly went extinct. Park Yuna's voice was quiet but hard. But we survived. We rebuilt. And we swore that no species would ever call for help and hear only silence again. She looked at her fleet. 700 ships. 3 million crew. The greatest military force ever assembled by any species in any galaxy. We built all of this for you, Ambassador. Not for war, not for conquest. We built it for the day when someone would call into the void and need someone to answer. She paused. Today you called. Today we answer. The communication ended. Telos stood in silence for a long moment. Admiral Kethras looked at him with tears in his eyes. We left them to die, Kethras whispered. 500 years ago, they asked for help, and we did nothing. And still they came for us. Telos nodded slowly. Yes, they came anyway. That is what makes them human. Outside, the hollow swarm regrouped. The second wave was coming. It would be larger. It would be smarter. The hollow learned fast. But looking at the human fleet, dark and silent and ready, Telos felt something he had not felt in months. Hope. The second wave came at dawn. Neth Avar Prime rotated slowly below the battle, its cities dark, its people hiding in shelters underground. Above them, war raged across the stars. Lieutenant Shin Yunji sat in the cockpit of her strike craft and watched the hollow swarm approach. She was 26 years old. She had trained for this moment since she was 6. Every simulation, every drill, every lesson, all leading to this. Her squadron flew in perfect formation behind her. 12 pilots, 12 strike craft. They called themselves the Iron Wolves, and they were among the best pilots in the fleet. Wolf Leader, this is command. The voice of Commander Bei Jian crackled through her headset. Enemy carrier detected at coordinate 773. That carrier is controlling approximately 200 attack vessels. Destroy it, and those vessels lose coordination. Understood, Command. Shin Yunji checked her weapons. Plasma cannons. Guided missiles. A single antimatter torpedo for the kill shot. Iron Wolves form attack pattern Delta. We punch through their screen, hit the carrier, and get out. No heroes, no unnecessary risks. We all go home. 12 voices confirmed. 12 pilots ready to die if necessary, but determined to live. The strike craft accelerated. Hollow attack vessels moved to intercept. They were fast and vicious, organic ships that looked like giant insects crossed with nightmares. Their weapons fired acid that could eat through hull armor in seconds. Shin Yunji did not slow down. Weapons free, she ordered. The Iron Wolves opened fire. Plasma bolts streaked across the void, finding targets with perfect accuracy. Hollow vessels exploded. Others dodged and weaved, trying to get close enough to use their acid weapons. They were too slow. Human pilots trained in simulations that would kill a normal person. They experienced 10,000 battles before they ever flew a real mission. They learned to think faster, react faster, survive longer. The Hollow were ancient and terrible, but they had never faced pilots like this. Shin Yunji spun her craft through a cloud of debris, lined up her shot, and fired her antimatter torpedo. The weapon streaked toward the Hollow carrier, a ship the size of a small moon, and struck its core. The explosion was silent in the vacuum of space. But inside the carrier, matter met antimatter and reality itself screamed. The carrier tore itself apart from the inside. 200 hollow attack vessels suddenly lost their connection to the swarm mind. They drifted, confused, easy targets. Wolf Leader, target destroyed. All wolves returning to base. Shin Yunji allowed herself a small smile. Another battle. Another victory. She would mourn later. She would feel later. Right now, she had a job to do. On the surface of a captured hollow command node, Sergeant Major Han Taiho led his team through corridors of flesh and bone. The node was a living thing, part of the hollow hive mind. Destroying it would blind the swarm in this sector. His team moved in silence. 10 soldiers in powered armor, carrying weapons designed to kill things that should not exist. They had trained for years in mock hollow environments, learning how the swarm thought, how it moved, how it died. A young Valorian observer followed them. She was a scientist named Kira Vet, assigned to document the human military for the collective's records. She was terrified. "How do you do this?" she whispered. Her voice barely made it through the translation device. "How you walk into these nightmares so calmly?" Hantayo did not stop moving. His eyes scanned every shadow, every movement. "We trained for it. Every day for years. We faced our fears until they became familiar. Then we faced them some more until they became boring." "But why?" Kiravet struggled to keep up. Why would anyone choose this life? This constant battle? This endless war? Hantayo paused. The corridor ahead was clear. He turned to look at the young alien scientist. She was small and fragile, with lavender skin and eyes that had never seen true violence until now. "My grandmother was 7 years old when the Dominion came to Earth," he said quietly. "She watched her parents die. She watched her city burn. She spent 5 years hiding in underground tunnels, eating whatever she could find, watching friends die of disease and hunger." Kiravet was silent. When the war ended, she had a choice. She could forget. She could move on. She could pretend it never happened. Hantayo resumed walking. Instead, she joined the Defense Force. She trained for 40 years. She helped build the fleet that you see today. And before she died, she told me one thing. "What?" She said, "Someone asked us for help once, and no one came. We will never let that happen to anyone else. Ever." Hantayo reached the core of the command node. "That is why we fight. Not for glory. Not for revenge. We fight because someone called for help. And humans always answer." He placed the charges. The team retreated. The command node died. Back on the Eternal Dawn, Fleet Admiral Park Yuna studied the battle reports. The second wave had been harder. The Hollow adapted faster than expected. They had learned to avoid the destroyer missiles. They had learned to scatter when targeted by the main batteries. They were evolving in real time. But so were the humans. Chief Engineer Moon Jae-sung had already modified the fleet's weapons twice. The Hollow adapted to one frequency. He created another. They learned to dodge one targeting pattern. He invented a new one. It was a race, evolution versus innovation, and humanity refused to lose. "Admiral," Captain Kang Do-yoon approached with a datapad. "The Valorian Council is requesting permission to speak with you. They have questions about our tactics." "What kind of questions?" "They want to know why we keep sending small squadrons into the heart of the swarm." Kang Do-yoon hesitated. "They believe it is too dangerous. They say we are wasting lives." Park Yuna looked at the tactical display. Shin Yoonji's squadron was already preparing for their next mission. Han Taeho's team was boarding a transport back to the flagship. Thousands of soldiers across the fleet were fighting, dying, and fighting again. "Tell them this," she said softly. "Every soldier in this fleet volunteered. Every pilot, every marine, every engineer. They knew what they were signing up for. They trained for years. They said goodbye to their families. They accepted that they might never come home." She watched a hollow ship explode under concentrated fire. They did this because 300 years ago, humanity learned that the universe is cruel. We learned that no one will save you. We learned that survival requires sacrifice. She turned to Kang Do-yoon. "But we also learned something else. We learned that some things are worth dying for. Protecting the innocent. Answering calls for help. Proving that not everyone in this cold universe is selfish and cruel." She paused. "Every soldier out there believes that. Every single one." Kang Do-yoon nodded slowly. I will tell them, Admiral. And tell them one more thing. Park Yuna's voice hardened. Tell them that we do not intend to waste a single life. Every death will mean something. Every sacrifice will count. We will make the Hollow pay for every human they kill, 1,000-fold. The battle continued. Day 2, Day 3, Day 4. The Hollow kept coming. The humans kept fighting. On Day 5, something changed. The Hollow sent a message. It was the first time they had ever communicated. The first time they had acknowledged an enemy as anything more than food. The message was simple. Why do you fight? You cannot win. We are infinite. You are finite. Surrender and the end will be quick. Fleet Admiral Park Yuna read the message. Then she smiled. It was not a kind smile. Send a response, she ordered. Tell them this. We are human. We have faced extinction before. We have stared into the void before. We have been abandoned and alone and afraid before. And we survived. We survived because we refused to surrender. We survived because we fight for something greater than ourselves. We survived because we made a promise. She stood. Her crew watched. Tell them, you are not the first nightmare we have faced. You will not be the last. And you will not win. Because we are humanity, and humanity keeps its promises. Today, we promise to protect these people. And we will burn every single one of your ships before we break that promise. The message went out. The Hollow were silent for a long time. Then they attacked with everything they had. The Hollow threw everything at them. Every ship, every weapon, every horror they had developed over 1 billion years of conquest. The swarm became a wall of death, rushing toward the human fleet like a tsunami made of nightmares. Commodore Yu Hejin stood on the bridge of the Crimson Fury and watched death approach. His ship was a battlecruiser, 5 kilometers of armor and weapons, one of the finest vessels in the fleet. Right now, it was the only thing standing between the Hollow and the evacuation transports, carrying 3 million Valorian refugees. All hands, this is the Commodore. His voice was calm. It had to be calm. His crew needed to believe they would survive, even if he was not certain. The enemy is throwing everything at us. Good. That means we are hurting them. That means they are afraid. Remember your training. Remember why we are here. And remember that behind us are 3 million innocent people who are counting on us to keep them alive. The crew responded with silence. They did not need to speak. They knew their jobs. They knew their duty. Weapons officer, target the lead vessels. Helm, hold position. We do not move. We do not retreat. We hold this line until the Admiral tells us otherwise. The Crimson Fury opened fire. The battle became chaos. Ships exploded. Debris filled the void. The Hollow crashed against the human line again and again, each wave stronger than the last. Human ships took damage. Some fell, but the line held. On the eternal dawn, Fleet Admiral Park Yuna directed the battle like a conductor directing an orchestra. Every ship had a role. Every weapon had a target. Every movement had a purpose. She had studied war for 50 years. She had fought in 12 campaigns. She had never faced an enemy like the Hollow. But she had also never commanded a fleet like this. Destroyer Group 7. Swing left and provide cover fire for the Crimson Fury. Battleship Wing 3. Concentrate fire on the enemy command cluster. Carrier Group. Launch reserve squadrons to intercept those flanking vessels. Orders flowed. Ships moved. The Hollow pushed. The humans pushed back. Dr. No Suman worked in the medical bay of the Eternal Dawn. The wounded kept coming. Burns from plasma fire. Broken bones from impacts. Poisoning from hollow acid that had eaten through hull sections. She had not slept in 48 hours. She did not plan to sleep until this was over. A young ensign lay on the table before her. Half his body was covered in acid burns. He was awake and screaming. Now Suman worked quickly, cutting away dead tissue, applying synthetic skin, injecting painkillers that would let him survive another hour. "Doctor," a nurse approached. "We have 30 more incoming. We are running out of beds." Then we put them on the floor. We put them in the corridors. We put them wherever we can, and we keep them alive. No, Suman did not look up from her patient. Every life matters. Every single one. The nurse nodded and ran to prepare. No, Suman finished with the ensign. He would live, maybe. She moved to the next patient. A woman with a crushed leg. The next. A man blinded by a flash from an exploding console. The next. The next. The next. She did not count. She did not think about how many she saved or how many she lost. She simply worked. That was all she could do. In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Moon Jae-sung fought a different battle. The Hollow had learned to disrupt human targeting systems. They had evolved some kind of interference field that made the fleet's weapons less accurate. Jae-sung had 6 hours to find a solution. He had a team of 40 engineers and access to the most advanced technology in human history. It should have been enough. It was not. The interference is biological, one of his engineers reported. They are generating it from their own bodies. It is like nothing we have ever seen. Jae-sung stared at the data. The Hollow were evolving in real time. Every hour, they became harder to kill. Every hour, they adapted to human weapons. It was terrifying. It was also impressive. "They learn fast," Jae-sung muttered. "Good. So do we." He began to work. If the Hollow were generating biological interference, then the solution was to attack the biology. Not with weapons. With information. He would design a virus that would disrupt their evolution. Something that would make them sick. Something that would slow them down. "Get me a sample of hollow tissue," he ordered. "Fresh, from a living specimen if possible." His engineers looked at each other. Getting a sample of living hollow tissue meant going into the swarm. It meant capturing a hollow creature. It was suicide. "I will go," a voice said. Jae-sung turned. Sergeant Major Han Tae-ho stood in the doorway of the engineering bay. He was still wearing his combat armor, still covered in the organic residue of the command node they had destroyed. "You need a sample. My team can get it." Jae-sung nodded. "Be careful. Careful is for people who have something to lose." Han Tae-ho smiled grimly. "I am just a soldier doing his job." He left. 4 hours later, he returned with a sample. 3 of his soldiers did not come back. Jae-sung did not ask what happened. He took the sample and went back to work. Navigator Choi Murray sat at her station on the Eternal Dawn and calculated hyperspace trajectories. The fleet needed to reposition. The Hollow were trying to flank them, sending a wave of ships around the battle to attack from behind. Hyperspace calculation was an art. The equations were complex, the variables countless. A mistake of 1% could send a ship into a star or strand it 1,000,000 light years from anywhere. Most navigators spent hours on a single calculation. Murray had minutes. She worked faster than any navigator in history. Her fingers moved across her console like a musician playing an instrument. Numbers flowed. Equations resolved. Trajectories appeared. Fleet command, this is navigation. I have a solution. If we jump destroyers 7 through 12 to coordinates 994, they will emerge directly behind the flanking force. The Hollow will not expect it. Admiral Park Yuna reviewed the solution. It was risky. A micro-jump in the middle of battle was dangerous. But Marie's calculations were always perfect. Always. Approved. Execute. 7 destroyers vanished from normal space. They reappeared behind the hollow flanking force, weapons already firing. The hollow vessels, caught completely off guard, died by the dozens. The flanking attack collapsed. On day 7, Chief Engineer Moon Jae-sung finished his virus. It was not a weapon. It was a thought, a piece of biological code that would disrupt the Hollow's ability to communicate. It would not kill them, but it would confuse them. How do we deliver it? Captain Kang Da-yoon asked. Jae-sung showed them. A single missile, carrying a biological payload. It would impact the Hollow ship and release the virus. The virus would spread through the swarm's biological communication network. In hours, every Hollow ship would be infected. Will it work? Admiral Park Yoon asked. I do not know, Jae-sung admitted. The Hollow are unlike anything we have ever studied. But I have done my best. That is all I can offer. Park Yoon nodded. Then we try. Fire the missile. The missile launched. It crossed the void in seconds. It struck a Hollow cruiser at the center of the swarm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Hollow screamed. It was not a scream of anger. It was a scream of confusion. Across the entire system, Hollow ships began to drift. Their coordination failed. Ships crashed into each other. Weapons fired at random. The swarm was blind. Fleet Admiral Park Yoon stood on her bridge and watched the chaos unfold. For the first time in 7 days, she allowed herself to hope. All ships, she spoke into the fleet-wide channel. The enemy is confused. This is our moment. Advance. Push them back. Show them what happens when they threaten people under our protection. 700 ships moved as one. They pushed into the swarm. They destroyed everything in their path. The Hollow tried to retreat, but they could not coordinate. They tried to fight back, but they could not target. They tried to survive. They failed. By day 9, the Hollow were broken. Not destroyed, not extinct, but beaten. For the first time in their billion-year existence, they turned and ran. Not from a system, not from a sector, from an entire galactic arm. On the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, Fleet Admiral Park Yoon watched the Hollow retreat. She felt no joy. She felt no triumph. She only felt tired. Casualties? She asked quietly. Captain Kang Da-yoon checked the reports. 37 ships destroyed. 12,000 dead. 12,000. Park Yoon closed her eyes. 12,000 families who would never see their loved ones again. 12,000 empty bunks. 12,000 stories ended. We won, Kang Da-yoon said softly. Yes, Park Yoon opened her eyes. We won. Now comes the hard part. The hard part? She looked at Neth of our prime, blue and beautiful in the viewing screen. Now we help them rebuild. Now we prove that we came for more than just war. Now we show them what humanity really is. She turned to her crew. All ships transition to support operations. Launch medical teams. Launch engineering teams. Launch supply ships. We saved their lives. Now we help them live. The fleet obeyed. The war was over. The work had just begun. The first human dropship touched down on Neth Aver Prime 3 hours after the Hollow retreat. It carried medical supplies, food, and a team of 30 doctors and nurses. More dropships followed. Then more. Then more. Ambassador Tellus stood at the edge of the landing zone and watched the humans work. They moved with purpose and speed. Crates were unloaded. Tents were raised. Medical stations appeared as if by magic. Within hours, a refugee camp that could house 50,000 people had grown from nothing. The Valorian people watched in silence. They did not know what to make of these strangers. 3 days ago, these same humans had destroyed a billion-year-old nightmare with weapons that defied understanding. Now they were handing out food to children and bandaging wounds with gentle hands. A human soldier approached Telos. He was tall and broad, with kind eyes that seemed too soft for a warrior. His name tag said, Corporal O Sunwoo. Ambassador, he said in perfect Valorian. The Admiral requests your presence at the command post. She wishes to discuss reconstruction plans. Telos nodded. Lead the way. They walked through the camp. Everywhere Telos looked, he saw humanity at work. Engineers repaired damaged buildings. Doctors treated the sick. Soldiers shared their own rations with hungry refugees. A young human woman sat on the ground, teaching a group of Valorian children how to fold paper into the shapes of birds. Why? Telos asked suddenly. Corporal O Sunwoo stopped walking. Why what, Ambassador? Why all of this? Telos gestured at the camp. You came to fight. You won. You could leave now. Take your fleet and go home. Instead, you stay. You help. You give. Why? Oh, Sunwoo was silent for a moment. Then he smiled. My mother used to tell me a story. When the Dominion came to Earth, there was a village in the mountains. The village had nothing to offer the war effort. No soldiers. No weapons. No resources. They were just farmers and teachers and children. He resumed walking. Telos followed. When the Dominion found the village, they destroyed it. Everyone died. Except one girl. She hid in the well for 3 days until human soldiers found her. They could have left her. They had a war to fight. They had no time for orphans. Oh, Sunwoo looked at the refugees around them. But they took her anyway. They fed her. They protected her. They gave her a home. What happened to her? She grew up. She became a doctor. She spent her whole life saving others because others had saved her. Oh, Sunwoo stopped in front of a large tent. That girl was my grandmother. And she taught me something important. What? She taught me that humanity is not measured by how we fight. It is measured by how we heal. By how we help. By what we do after the battle is over. He opened the tent flap. The Admiral is waiting, Ambassador. Telos entered the tent. Fleet Admiral Park. Yuna stood over a table covered in maps and data screens. She looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded her eyes. Her uniform was wrinkled. But she was still working. Still planning. Still thinking about how to help. Ambassador Telos. She looked up and nodded. Thank you for coming, Admiral. Telos approached the table. I wanted to thank you. What you have done for my people. There are no words. There is no need for thanks. Park Yuna returned her attention to the maps. We did what was right. What was necessary. What we promised to do. About that promise. Telos hesitated. You said that no species should ever call for help and hear only silence. You said humanity learned that lesson the hard way. Park Yuna was still for a moment. Then she looked up. Her eyes were old. So old. 300 years ago, the Dominion came to destroy us. We were young. We were weak. We believed that the universe was kind and that peace was possible with all species. She shook her head slowly. We were wrong. What happened? We sent messages to every species we had contacted. 53 civilizations. We told them what was coming. We begged for help. Park Yuna's voice was quiet. 53 civilizations heard our call. 0 responded. Telos felt shame burn in his chest. His ancestors had been among those 53 civilizations. The war lasted 20 years. We lost 2 billion people. We lost Earth itself for a decade. We were pushed to the edge of extinction. Park Yuna looked at the map showing Valorian reconstruction efforts. When we finally won, we had a choice. We could have become bitter. We could have turned our backs on the universe, then it turned its back on us. We could have become conquerors ourselves, but you did not. No, Park Yuna smiled. It was a tired smile, but a genuine one. We decided to be better. We decided that the universe being cruel was no excuse for us to be cruel. We decided that someone had to answer when others called for help, even if no one had answered us. She walked to the tent entrance and looked out at the camp. Human soldiers were playing games with Valorian children. Human doctors were teaching Valorian medical staff new techniques. Human engineers were showing Valorian workers how to repair their own buildings. This is who we are, Ambassador. Not the warships. Not the weapons. Not the fleet that filled your sky with fire. She turned back to tell us. We are the species that refuses to let others suffer alone. We are the species that answers. Always. Over the following weeks, the reconstruction continued. The human fleet remained in orbit, not as conquerors, but as protectors. They sent teams to every damaged city. They repaired power stations and water systems. They rebuilt hospitals and schools. Commander Beijion led a team of engineers to restore the Valorian communication network. It had been damaged during the Hollow attack, leaving millions of people isolated. Within 5 days, the network was not just repaired but upgraded. The Valorians now had better communications than they had before the war. Chief Engineer Moon Jae-sung shared his technology freely. Not weapons. The humans kept those secret. But medical technology, agricultural technology, energy systems. Everything the Valorians needed to rebuild stronger than before. Why do you give us all this? A Valorian scientist asked him. This technology is valuable. You could sell it. You could use it as leverage. Instead, you just give. Jason looked at her with confusion. Why would we not give? You need it. We have it. The calculation is simple. The scientist did not understand. She had lived her entire life in a universe where every species looked out for itself. The concept of unconditional generosity was foreign to her. But slowly, she began to understand. Lieutenant Shin Yoonji and her squadron were assigned to patrol the outer system. Not to fight. The Hollow were gone, but to reassure the Valorian people that they were safe. Every day, her fighters flew over the major cities. Every day, the people looked up and saw human ships in their sky. And every day, they felt a little safer. Shin Yoonji received a message from a young Valorian girl. The girl had seen her squadron fly over her town and wanted to thank her. She had drawn a picture of a human fighter jet with hearts around it. Shin Yoonji kept that picture in her cockpit for the rest of her career. Sergeant Major Han Tae-ho spent his days training Valorian soldiers. Not to fight humans. To defend themselves. He taught them tactics and strategies that humanity had developed over 3 centuries of war. He taught them how to survive. You are teaching us to resist you, one Valorian officer observed. These techniques could be used against humans. Han Tae-ho shrugged. Maybe someday you will need to fight humans. I hope not. But if that day comes, you should be able to defend yourselves. That is how trust works. We trust you enough to give you the means to hurt us. That is the only way true friendship is possible. The officer thought about that for a long time. Dr. No Suman stayed on Neth Hour Prime for 3 years. She trained an entire generation of Valorian doctors. She taught them techniques that would save millions of lives. When she finally returned to Earth, the Valorian Medical Council named the hospital after her. She said it was unnecessary. They built it anyway. On the day the human fleet finally departed, millions of Valorians gathered to watch. The ships lifted into orbit, dark shapes against the blue sky. They formed into formation, and prepared to jump to hyperspace. Ambassador Telos stood in the High Council chamber and watched them go. Admiral Kethros stood beside him. They did not speak. There were no words adequate for what they felt. Fleet Admiral Park Yuna sent one final message before the fleet departed. People of the Valorian Collective. 3 years ago, you called into the void for help. Today, we leave you stronger than we found you. Your cities are rebuilt. Your people are safe. Your future is bright. This is what we came for. This is what humanity does. And if you ever need us again, we will return. The beacon remains. The promise remains. Humanity answers, always. The fleet vanished into hyperspace. Telos watched the empty sky for a long time. Then he looked at the beacon that still sat in the corner of the council chamber. It was small and simple. Just a metal sphere with a single button. But it represented something much greater. It represented a species that had been abandoned by the universe and responded with compassion. A species that had learned cruelty and chosen kindness. A species that had built the greatest war fleet in history, not for conquest, but for protection. The beacon hummed softly, waiting for the next call. Humanity would answer. Humanity always answered. And somewhere in the dark between stars, Fleet Admiral Park Yuna sat in her quarters and looked at a photograph. It showed a small blue planet hanging in space. Earth. Home. She touched the photograph gently. We did good today, she whispered. We did what you taught us. We answered. We helped. We were better. The Eternal Dawn cruised toward home, carrying 3 million soldiers who had risked everything for strangers. They would receive medals and parades and thanks. But that was not why they had fought. They had fought because someone called for help. And humans always answer. Always. The end.